Anybody would like to speak for citizens' comments? Come on up. Just please give us your name and your ward.
I know that this is happening. Hi there. My name is Jason Benware. I live in Ward 1, just down the street. So I came in and I talked at the joint meeting a little while ago, and I made some comments about how City Council had sort of stuck all the tough decisions on the school board. So I was thinking about the decisions you guys are going to have to make, and I looked on the State of New Hampshire website because I was curious about some things. One of the things I was curious about was the cost of education per student in Claremont in relation to the other towns and cities around where we live. What I discovered was that Claremont, overall, we are higher on average on every level than the state average. We are $917 higher at the elementary level. We are $2,101 higher at the middle school level. And we're $1,451 at the high school level. I'm sorry, I did that math wrong. We are $2,451 higher at the high school level. So my math is going to be a little off. However, that being said, I tried to call the SAU today to get the numbers of how many kids were actually in each school. I wasn't able to get a hold of them. However, I got onto the publicschoolreview.com, and I was able to find pretty accurate numbers for all the kids that are in our schools. So roughly there are 878 kids in our elementary schools. Seem about right. 304 at Disnard, 227 in Bluff, and 347 in Maple, give or take whoever's moved out of town. There's 399 at the middle school, there's 572 at the high school. Based upon those numbers and those variances, I multiplied the numbers out. And just if we were just average versus what we are right now, we're over $2.5 million sort of over where the average is. On that note, we have $685,651,000 in change in our tax rolls. So taking that down per thousand and multiplying it into that 2.5 million, somewhere around $3.61 more higher based on being above the average for educating our children. I don't know why we're higher. I know that other towns that are roughly the same tax basis, several towns are considerably lower than we are. For instance, Franklin, New Hampshire, they're smaller on the tax roll. They're about they're 524 million, so they're slightly smaller than we are. But their average cost to educate a child at the elementary level is $10,232. Their middle school is $13,365, and their high school is $11,918. I don't know why that is that way, and frankly, yeah. Yes, sir.
Two quick things. Claremont receives a lot of grant monies.
Okay.
So the monies that we spend on grants is about $3 million a year. That goes into that number. So those are costs that the taxpayers are not paying that we're being reimbursed for.
Okay.
The reason why Franklin is less, and I used to be the BA in Franklin, is they don't include their grants because all their grants run through the SAU, so their grants don't show up in the cost per student. And I think if that was in there, you'd see a lot closer to where we're at here.
Fair enough. So we'll stay out of Franklin altogether. We're still higher than the average.
Based on grant funding, though, for the most part.
Okay. My question is this, and I'm not putting anybody on the spot right now, but I'd like to know at some point, maybe, what raises us above that? Is it special education? Is it the tech center that we're standing in? The reason I ask is because if it was simply special education, and maybe I'm oversimplifying this, however, if it was simply special education, at the elementary level, we're at $1,000 over, but by the time we get to the high school level, we're at $2,500 over. Yeah.
Well, I think I can answer your question because I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the numbers. I've heard that, the same circle, I don't know how many thousands of times in the last 30 years that I've been doing this.
Okay.
The answer is pretty simple. It has nothing to do with the number of students in the school. So making that comparison is kind of irrelevant. It's got everything to do with property value. It's got everything to do with real estate market. It's got everything to do with reimbursements and grants. There is no correlation that you can say average student in this place and average student in this place. because you got to look at their property values.
Well, that doesn't
The tax rate isn't set, that cost isn't set.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, why does it cost more to educate a student? Not how much the tax rate is. I'm simply asking, why does it cost more to educate a student than it does somewhere else? It's nothing to do with tax rate, because the cost to educate somebody is how much it costs out of your pocket to educate somebody, unless I'm reading this differently. So I get what you're saying about tax rate, but that's not what I'm asking about. I'm simply asking about why it costs more.
Well, I guess my point to that whole exercise, because again, this is a conversation that I've heard for 30 years, there's no easy answer to that. It's not one we're going to come up with. It's a moving, Michael attests to it. It's not, if it was that simple, we would have fixed it 20 years ago.
But it would be nice to try.
But there's no A plus B equals C to this.
Absolutely.
What I would like to do, I'd like to respond to your questions at the next school board meeting. I think it would warrant for the community, not just for you, but for the community, to have an answer, to have more details,
And I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. I just wanted to bring
don't take
this
it the
up.
wrong way.
But let me segue, because I have two questions.
Oh, go ahead.
So my first one was having to do with why we're higher, and if indeed we are higher because we're higher. I mean, if you say that indeed there is no solution to this and which you can never figure it out because it's so complex, then the next question is obviously, based upon 2015 tax numbers, 57% of our taxes were paid to fund the school, based upon state and town taxes, okay? That's not getting any better because obviously the state is continually reducing how much money they give us, and then they give us $270,000 to fix our roads, and they say they've done us a favor, when really they've probably taken more away from us on the other end.
They give us
so it's like me taking $10 out of your pocket every week, and then at the end of the year say, hey, I'm going to give you a $500 bonus. It's really, essentially they've done us no favors, right? That being said, I'm going to use a word here, and I think it's going to upset at least one of you. What's going on with us with the Claremont decision? I know, I've heard this so many times, it gives the Claremont a black eye and all this, but you know what? It also points out a very specific problem that our town has and several other impoverished towns have, is that we don't get enough funding, we can't give our kids an adequate education, and we're bleeding the taxpayers dry because we don't have enough money. So what's going to happen on our side of things? Now, Mr. Rapp responded to me via social media and sort of intimated to me that conversations were being had at the school board level, and our lawyer, and there's several lawyers working on this, and people are talking about it, which is all wonderful that we're conversing about it, but it seems to me, I'm getting the feeling, like many things, people would rather just sort of sit back on all the different districts and kind of talk about what the problem is, but who's actually going to actually do something about it? Because frankly, we could talk all day long, but eventually somebody has to move on this. So I'm happy we're talking about it, if indeed that's what's going on. And Mr. Conair, who's our lawyer, I assume he's doing something about it as well. Are there any timelines on any of this stuff where we can actually pin down, are we going to do something about it, or are we going to just sit back and look at the problem?
I can answer that question.
What's that?
The Claremont decision is simple. They never did what they were supposed to do.
I know that.
And it's ironic, not ironic, but coincidentally not, Franklin was one of the other towns, and there were 2 or 3 others in the decision. But the point is, the reason we had the Claremont decision, because the legislature never lived up to their end of the bargain.
Yeah.
They lost. They just reshuffled everything around, called them donor towns, did a bunch of really cool stuff. The legislature, so they just took money back. We're right back to where we were. I think we're worse than we were when the Claremont decision. And the point to that is, there's nothing we can do here. It's got to be done in Concord. The legislature's got to somehow grow a pair and do it.
Well, so the Supreme Court, right, in 2006 reaffirmed that they were unconstitutionally funding towns like ours, correct? So if I go to the Supreme Court and Mr. McGoodwin sues me because I did something like I built a 10-foot fence and he doesn't want me to have it there, and I go to the Supreme Court and they tell me I got to tear that fence down, and I don't tear it down, then all of a sudden he contacts the Supreme Court and I get pulled back in there and I'm in contempt of court, right? So theoretically speaking, the state right now is in contempt of court. Why have we not approached that at that level? Now, these may be very simplified, oversimplified questions, but I want to know how many other people, I know there's people in this town who want to know this stuff, so here I am standing up here asking, are we going to do something about it?
If I may, I think your point's very well taken, and I'm very pleased that you're discussing it publicly. It can't be done by one person alone. This is not a district issue, this is the city of Claremont issue. I'm working with our state reps. I'm just one person. The city council and the school board meets periodically. Tonight's agenda, Education Finance New Hampshire, headed to a rural crisis. This is a report that went out. It's on our website. It's pretty meaty, but it gives you an idea of how serious this is. In mid-July, I was on New Hampshire Public Radio about this very issue. And I said that zip code should not determine the educational opportunity for children, your children, any children in this community. But in truth, zip code is and does make a difference. Here's an example. A local community down the road, their district is smaller, they have fewer students, fewer schools, their budget $10 million more. Why? They have the revenue access. That doesn't mean we're victims and we're going to lay down, but this is not, I'm not going to wait for Concord to fix this. I'm going to be working with state reps, and I'm going to continue to have public discussions about this and hopefully move toward leveling the playing field, because right now the playing field isn't level. We're very proud about what we're doing here in Claremont School District, but measured by our students, the academics, the athletics, the arts, but we also acknowledge the taxpayer is above their nose in water. We know that we cannot resolve this by raising taxes. It's beyond that point. But in the same light, we cannot continue to survive if this reduction in revenue from the state continues. Our budget last year went up $76,000. The tax rate went up 11 cents. But because of a lack of state aid, that 11 cents bumped to $1.25 a thousand.
That's
So-
because we have a 15th century tax basis that we're running. That's why. Because we're running a tax base that worked really good in feudal England, but it doesn't work very well in our state.
So I can't tell you this is going to get better. I can tell you we're not going to sit back and expect others to do something about it. But it's going to really require not just someone like myself or a school board, it's going to require a community effort.
I agree.
To acknowledge and to say this is not okay. You know, where a child lives should not determine their educational opportunity. It shouldn't.
I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's,
agenda, but I would like, with that said, I'd like to kind of hash out at that time, because I'm feeling a lot of sitting back and waiting to see what happens. When are we gonna act? When are we gonna head the fight
That's what I
to
Well, to Mike,
push the issue? Sitting back and waiting, how long are we gonna sit back and wait?
Well, I'm not sitting back and waiting. I've been as active as I can. The city council is going to be discussing with the school board next month, education finance in New Hampshire, headed to a rural crisis. This is not a district issue. This is the Claremont concern.
Right.
And, the Claremont case in the 90s, the state's in contempt. The state's in contempt. But nothing has happened from it because of the funding issue. All I know is this. I'm not waiting for others, but this is not going to be a school board issue. This needs to be a community issue, and it's going to require some strategic action of stepping up and going to Concord.
So that's not gonna happen unless someone steps up. Someone needs to start the process. So I think if we could have it as a discussion item at
well, what I'd like to do is make it more than a discussion item if with the city council, if we can pull it off. I'd like to have that, and I would like to, as much as we can insist, every representative that we have be there. And I'd also like to invite the governor to see if he's willing to come down and make sure you're here. And to cut to the chase on it, because I like
to come here.
I'm going to reach out to him because I was actually listening to some stuff with him today, and we'll see. John Lynch was a great advocate. If Sununu's the same way, but here's the reality. We need guys like you to step up and run, and I'm like you, I like to simplify and I don't pull punches with it. We need somebody that's going to go to Concord and not A, get sucked into the political game and suck up to the party, or B, go down there and just badmouth his own city.
It's funny that you say that.
Well, I know, but we need someone to actually go to Concord and be willing to fight. I tried when I was there. I've been fighting this for years Middleton's been trying it. The issue is, we can scream and shout all we want, but our layer, we have no power if those reps go against us.
You know what we have, though, now that we didn't have in the 90s or even in 2006? You have the power of social media, and I don't think you're harnessing it as well as you could. You know, the fact of the matter is, if somebody kills a lion in Africa, you'll get 7 billion people upset about it on social media. So if you can stir people up about the plight of our poor town, I know it's a terrible image to have, but it's the truth. It's the true image.
The problem we have, in all honesty, and I respect, I'm with you, man. I'll sign it, whatever. But the problem we have is, social media, getting people upset doesn't accomplish a thing on social media. Nothing. I could get 1,000 people upset, can't touch 2 people who are actually on the ground doing something. And in Concord, we're outgunned, we're outnumbered because the southern state has all the reps. They're going to protect their turf. They don't care about Claremont. That's why we had to sue. If they had fully funded the Augenblick formula 40 years ago, we would have never had the Claremont lawsuit. If they fully funded the Claremont lawsuit, we wouldn't be talking about this. So the problem has got to be elevated to a point where I don't think the legislature is ever going to have the power to do anything about it. It's going to have to get to the governor where someone's going to say right is right, wrong is wrong. But I said years ago we should stop sending money to the state and do what we want, and tell them to take a hike and make them fight us, but no one ever took me on that one.
So my question is we're talking about it as a, and I want to echo what Mike just said, because it does seem like we're sitting back and, my terminology, we're admiring the problem, and we're not doing anything about it. And I'm hearing from a lot of constituents hopeful that this school board can do something. I guess my only question is why is this in the realm of legislative when it's clearly, in my mind, judicial?
That was always the argument.
My point of view, we are engaged in the New Hampshire Supreme Court now, as a district, over contract language. So why can't we engage with the Supreme Court over this?
Well, what they did is when the Supreme Court ruled, the legislature, they just changed the game and said, we're going to define adequate. So every child is entitled to adequate. Now adequate means whatever the dollar amount is, they're done. They've done what the Supreme Court said in their mind. Adequate is $4,000 or whatever it is, which isn't even close to what we need. So it's the legislature, they just keep politicizing the heck out of this, and we die on the vine for it. But sorry for anything.
I must say, though, I don't consider the board or the district to be laying down expecting someone to do it for us. A month ago, this report was published. I sent it to you electronically. It's on the agenda tonight. It's on the city council. We're going to be having continued discussion of this. This is not a district issue. This is a Claremont and other communities like Franklin issue. It's not going to be fixed by a letter, but it's going to be fixed by a movement. And that's how change occurs, by a movement, not by discussion. So the ball is starting to roll if people have the wherewithal to stand up and be a part of that momentum. Then we'll have a better chance. But, as Chris said, we are a minority. But understand too, the city of Claremont has some wonderful attributes, but we also have a revenue concern. It's a revenue concern. Nearby communities don't have that revenue concern. They're in a different place. So that's something that the city council and the prior city manager and the current city manager are attempting to work through. State aid is not going to fix the city of Claremont.